Right this way, everyone? Right there, please.
Intimate conversation.
Better than I could ask for. All right, Benny, fire away.
First of all, Mr. Belafonte, Harry, I think I can call you Harry now that we're this close. Now that we're this close,
Harry.
I have to call you Harry.
Is there any humor in this crowd?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely, plenty of it. But you know, we've been doing this at Afropop, bringing out the Africanness in America for 20 years, and you've been doing it a lot longer than that. And what I want to ask you is just, what have you, if you were to like point out the kind of like the big moments in terms of this whole enterprise of introducing America, kind of really reintroducing America to Africa, because it's always been there. I mean, I know when I was a kid, my mother had that Calypso record you were just signing, and she played it in the house. She was a folk music fan, and she had Lead Belly. I loved that stuff. You know, that really set me on the road that led me into Afropop. And so for me, that was a moment right there when I was introduced to things that might never have come my way living in rural New Jersey, you know. But here we are, all these years later, we have a president whose father is an African. I mean, things we could never have imagined. These are sort of milestone moments, but what are the ones that stick out for you in terms of this whole process of America becoming reacquainted with its Africanness?
Well, I think America's always been acquainted, excuse me, I think America's always been acquainted with its Africanness. If you place it in the context of the time frame you're talking about, then you have leaped many decades ahead.
It's true.
America did a lot to define Africa. When you go back, not just to slavery, but in the 20th century, the big screen began to show images of Africa, and you saw Tarzan swinging through the trees with the ignorant, dumb natives who were mostly white people, dwarfs and short, tiny people who were made up to look black. And they defined Africa as a dark, mysterious, ignorant continent. But parallel to that was Marcus Garvey and what he did in raising America, the dawn of the 20th century, to the ideas of what Africa was about in the Back to Africa movement. And then, of course, there was Haile Selassie, which we knew a great deal about and what was going on, and the invasion of that little country by the Axis powers, the fascists, Italy.
Yep.
And then, of course, the consciousness that was raised by Paul Robes, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, and others who did much to impact African Americans and America with an image and a history of Africa that did much to serve a higher order. I think that the Second World War was a time when America was required, based upon the vastness of that violent campaign, to review its attitude towards peoples of color. Because when the war took place, the colonial powers were, in fact, quote unquote, the democracies that came together to end race domination, to take away the idea of Hitler and race superiority. And within the Allied forces, the British had Africans in their expeditionary armies. Mm-hmm. The French had their own forces, and on and on. We as Americans began to know more about Africa. We sent our troops to fight in Africa, Northern Africa. We had a long association on the issues of the African continent and what it meant to control that continent. And at the end of that war, we started a mighty campaign to begin to reconquer and re-identify our relationship to that continent. Now, if you're talking about broad cultural perspectives,
Yeah, the cultural
then
side.
we didn't really get to that until pretty much well into the 20th century,
Yeah.
into the last half of it. When Miriam Makeba came here,
It's big, yes.
when a lot of African artists began to have access to the universities of America, to our communities, and many of us did things to give these artists a platform in which they could perform, and their integration with the civil rights movement, with our own ideals, with our own hopes for liberation, and their hopes for liberation in Africa, bonded us in a way that was unique and new, and that bond is never broken.
So where do we go from here? When you look ahead, like what are the frontiers, particularly on this cultural front? Because for all that's been achieved, I do still feel that when you go around the country and talk to people, most Americans still don't really seem to know all that much about this, despite 20 years of Afropop on public radio. You know, it seems to me that we're well begun, but there's a ways yet to go. What do you see as the frontier of this kind of process?
Well, you're talking about America.
Yeah.
You're talking about a challenge that has been prevalent and exists in this country from the beginning. Excuse me. I don't think Americans are that informed about any country outside of the United States and Europe. Our Eurocentric ties have dominated our thinking about what the world is, and anything outside of that very narrow circle of cultural and historic experience, we have no regard for or any deeply connected interest in it, except when it comes time for conflict. So when you go to Vietnam, or you go to Africa, excuse me, or you go to Iraq, all of a sudden we're forced into a pursuit of knowledge on who are these people and what is the strange place we find ourselves in. And through that prism, we're beginning to learn more and more about the fact that there is another world. What's unfortunate about it is that the introduction is always violent.
Yes.
The introduction is always from a negative.
Right.
So Afropop serves a wonderful purpose in that no matter how much we overture other cultures, America does, and it's always through a violent platform.
Yes.
Afropop and other forces bring us to the more loving,
Yes.
the more caring,
Yes.
the greater humanity
Right.
in all of these different places that we should be immersed in.
To see the sweet celebratory side of a place like the Congo or Sudan it's pretty novel in face of
Absolutely.
the political news. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. That's just well. And thank you so much for everything and for being here tonight.
I enjoy it.
Good. Well,
I shouldn't be thanked for something that rewards me so much.